They had not come this far to yield. Come storms, runes, or the golden storm itself, they would meet it. Fire and blood in hand, hearts unbowed. Yet as Daenerys Targaryen and Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, looked out over the battered courtyard of the Red Keep that evening, a weariness settled upon them both. Wind rattled the loosened shutters above, and the smell of fresh rain mingled with the faint stench of old ash. Their small contingent of soldiers who had returned from the ambush near the Rose Road was dispersing, some tending their wounds, others carrying the bodies of the fallen for a respectful burial. The captured runic weapons had been locked away in a reinforced storeroom deep in the keep, wards placed by the most knowledgeable maesters they could find, though none claimed to be true experts in such vile magic. Supper was a somber affair, taken in a half-rebuilt side hall that Daenerys, Jon, Grey Worm, Tormund, and Tyrion now used for council dinners. A single long table was set out, lit by a half-dozen torches and a central brazier. The walls were still scorched from the Night King's assault and subsequent battles. Parts of the vaulted ceiling overhead had been patched with fresh timbers. Fatigue lined every face present. The meal itself was frugal, a simple stew of vegetables and salted pork, with coarse bread. Wine was poured, though none seemed particularly eager to indulge. Tyrion, propped in his chair and nursing his wounded leg, scowled at the small tin cup before him. "Any more news from the roads?" he asked quietly, breaking the subdued silence. Grey Worm, seated across from him, shook his head. "Not yet. Patrols found no further sign of that fleeing runic swordsman. The Watchers remain on high alert, but for now, quiet." Tormund let out a loud sigh. "Quiet is an illusion. These Golden Storm men are out there, stirring trouble or preparing to. Just a matter of time." He tore a chunk of bread, dipping it in stew. "We stomped a few, but they'll keep crawling out of the mud." Daenerys rested both elbows on the table, chin on her interlaced fingers. The lamplight made faint shadows under her eyes. "Which is precisely why we must gather the realm. We can't let them pick us apart, region by region. We need the lords, whatever their grudges, to unify or at least to coordinate defenses." Jon nodded, pushing his stew aside half uneaten. "We send ravens not just to the major houses, but to every significant minor lord, too. We invite them to a great council. Let them see that dragons are not the only answer, that we mean to stand together." Tyrion took a measured sip of wine, grimacing slightly at the taste. "I've already begun drafting such letters, but we must choose a location. Holding the council in King's Landing might deter some lords who still see the city as cursed. Then again, Harrenhal is large and centrally located, but it's also known to be cursed. Riverrun is too small, Winterfell too far north, Highgarden was pillaged. Each choice has drawbacks." Daenerys traced an idle pattern on the table's surface. "King's Landing is partially ruined, yes, but it is still the seat of the crown. Let them come. If they want to stand on ceremony, they can see how we're rebuilding. We'll keep the dragons visible, but not menacing. At least if lords gather here, we can ensure their protection with our watchers." Grey Worm inclined his head. "Securing the city to host a large gathering will require resources, but it's doable. We'll need guard rotations. We must also make sure no hidden caches of runic weapons remain inside these walls." Tormund snorted. "All these fancy lords in one place? I'll be sure to find a corner and watch them bicker. At least it'll keep me from boredom." A ghost of a smile touched Daenerys' lips. "Yes, Tormund. Your presence might remind them we are not the only power that matters. The free folk stand with us, too." Tyrion set down his cup, pushing it aside. "Then it's decided, King's Landing. I'll draft invitations tonight, encouraging all major houses to attend. The question is, how soon can they arrive? Some of them are scattered, dealing with their own harvests or local disputes. Could take weeks. We have a realm that's half in ruin." Jon knitted his brow. "Better a delayed council than none. We can give them a month. Anyone who fails to show without a pressing cause, we take note. Meanwhile, we fortify the city, keep watch on the roads, and ready ourselves for any sign of the Golden Storm's activities." He paused, glancing at Daenerys. We might also ask Bran if his visions show anything more concrete. If only he would speak more plainly. She exhaled slowly. We'll try. We'll also consult with the Red Priestess, Zahara, though I do not fully trust her. She claims willingness to help, but these runic forging secrets might be older than R'hlloreth's faith. We can't be sure of her motives. Tyrion tapped the table, a faint echo in the battered hall. Then that's the plan. Meanwhile, we should prepare housing for each lord and their retinues. We must keep them comfortable enough not to resent us. The city is short on lodging, but we can commandeer certain manors. Have we coin for that? He looked pointedly at Daenerys. A flicker of resignation crossed her face. We have the Iron Banks loan, as distasteful as it is. We can funnel some of that to handle accommodations. Perhaps we'll set up tents beyond the city if needed. King's Landing is not the pristine capital it once was. Jon added, We'll also instruct them to bring minimal armies. A small guard each, no more. We can't risk 1,000 different factions camping outside the walls. That might be a recipe for chaos. Grey Worm offered a brisk nod. Wise. I'll coordinate a system of safe passages. Let them see we treat them fairly. But if any tries to bring a large host, we turn them back. The conversation tapered into details of security, supply, and logistics. Eventually, a hush fell across the table. Dawn was still hours away, but they had to act quickly. Tyrion would draft letters through the night, and Daenerys would affix her royal seal at first light. Jon left to check on some watchers in the courtyard. Tormund wandered off with a half-empty tankard, muttering about wanting to see the city's walls in the moonlight. Grey Worm posted additional guards around the keep's perimeter, anticipating unrest. Daenerys lingered in the hall, finishing her stew alone, her mind spinning. She thought of her original dream, to free the world from tyranny. Instead, she felt as though new tyrannies emerged from the ashes. Runic swords, cultish alliances, a golden storm. She looked at the battered walls and wondered how many times King's Landing must be saved from ruin. Then, with a sigh, she rose from the table, bidding Tyrion good night. Their path was set. The Great Council would be summoned, and with it, the fate of Westeros might hinge on the next few weeks. Over the next days, a flurry of ravens took flight from the Red Keep's rookery. Each bore a carefully written missive sealed with the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen and the dire wolf of House Stark, signifying the unity of Daenerys and Jon's rule. The messages welcomed every great and minor lord to gather in King's Landing within 1 month's time. They spoke of the realm's need for solidarity and the looming threat of foreign conspiracies. They also promised safe passage, guaranteed by the monarchy's watchers. In the city, workers toiled from dawn to dusk, clearing rubble, erecting scaffolding around half-destroyed towers, and rebuilding sections of the outer wall. A wave of new refugees trickled in from the countryside, seeking shelter in the capital, some bearing tales of strange sightings. Robed figures in the night, smoldering runes etched into barn doors, or caravans that vanished. Many of these stories could not be confirmed, but they spread unease. Tyrion set about organizing lodging. He pressed reluctant landlords to open their inns or large houses, promising payment from the crown. The Iron Bank's envoy, Reginald Hather, hovered discreetly at the edges, reminding them that the bank would expect timely repayment. Tyrion responded with wry nods, determined not to let the crown become a mere puppet to bravos. Meanwhile, Grey Worm and the Unsullied took care to supervise distribution of funds, ensuring corruption did not devour all the coin. The Red Priestess, Zahara, remained near the harbor, occasionally preaching on street corners but more often sending her acolytes to help feed the poor or tend to the sick. She claimed it was the will of the Lord of Light to serve the suffering, though many still eyed her movement with suspicion. She and her followers lit bonfires at night near the docks, singing low chants in High Valyrian. Some small folk found comfort in their words. Others muttered that it smelled of foreign sorcery. Daenerys made it clear that she would tolerate the presence of the Red Priests so long as they caused no disturbances. Zahara adhered to that line, showing no aggression, only quiet conviction that a greater conflict approached. On occasion, She sent messages requesting an audience with Daenerys or Jon, offering glimpses of her visions in the flames. Their uneasy alliance continued, for neither side could afford open hostility. As the weeks ticked by, the first responses arrived. From Winterfell, Sansa Stark sent word that she and Arya would come, accompanied by a modest retinue of northern lords, House Manderly, House Serwyn, possibly Lady Brienne as well. From the Vale, Lord Robin Arryn and Lord Royce confirmed they would attend. Edmure Tully of Riverrun pledged to ride south. Gendry Baratheon wrote from Storm's End, promising to bring a small party of Stormlanders. House Redwyne from the Arbor, House Hightower from Old Town, and scattered lords of the Reach each answered, some with guarded acceptance, others more enthusiastic. The Westerlands were less cooperative. Many lords there still nursed old loyalty to House Lannister or felt slighted by the Crown's new rule. But a handful of lesser houses said they would come, curious if Tyrion Lannister's presence might offer them a path to reconciliation. Dorne gave the strongest reply. Lady Nymella stated she would travel home to gather her supporters, then return for the council with a significant retinue from Sunspear. She also hinted that not all Dornish lords trusted Targaryens again, but the chance to reassert their autonomy publicly might lure them forth. One region remained silent, the Iron Islands. Yara Greyjoy had recently left King's Landing for Pike, but no Raven soared back. Daenerys worried that Euron's rumored alliances might be stirring trouble at sea, preventing contact. Jon tried to reassure her that Yara could handle herself. Still, the Iron Islands' lack of response felt ominous. With the council date approaching, King's Landing awoke one morning to an unusual sight. Dozens of tents and pavilions sprouting along the northern road outside the city walls. Tyrion had arranged an encampment market for the lesser retinues, space for lords and knights who couldn't find suitable quarters in the half-rebuilt capital. Stall keepers and tradesmen flocked to the area, hoping to profit. It gave the outskirts the feel of a small festival, albeit one overshadowed by watchtowers and the occasional swirl of dragons overhead. In the city, Daenerys and Jon walked the repaired battlements, surveying the bustling sprawl. Drogon and Umbrax soared above sometimes, drawing stares. Rhaegal remained at Dragonstone under partial watch, still not quite as large or battle-tested, but he had mostly recovered from the earlier wounds. The monarchy deemed it wise to keep at least one dragon separate, in case of infiltration or sabotage in the capital. One late afternoon, near the city gates, trumpets sounded as the gates creaked open for a caravan bearing the banners of House Stark. Daenerys, alerted by watchmen, decided to greet them personally. Jon stood at her side, heart pounding faintly at the thought of seeing his siblings again after so many months. The cobblestone thoroughfare bustled with onlookers eager to glimpse the famed Winterfell retinue. Leading the group was a knot of northern cavalry in fur cloaks, the direwolf sigil emblazoned on shields. Among them, Daenerys recognized Sansa Stark, regal on a tall chestnut mare, her red hair braided in a northern style. Her face was set in calm determination, though her eyes flicked about as if measuring the damage to King's Landing. Arya Stark rode beside her, wearing a simpler traveling cloak. A handful of lords followed, wiry Lord Manderly, his girth perched precariously on a horse, along with lesser lords and ladies from the north. Brienne of Tarth, in polished armor, flanked them with watchful eyes. As they halted near the keep's courtyard, Daenerys and Jon descended the steps. The watchers parted, letting them approach. Sansa dismounted gracefully, sweeping a cloak around her shoulders against the southern chill. "My queen," she said, offering Daenerys a dip of the head, formal though not obsequious. "It's been too long." Daenerys inclined her head in return, studying Sansa's calm, poised demeanor. "We welcome you, Lady Sansa, as well as your retinue. I am no longer the only monarch here, as you see." She gestured toward Jon. "He shares the crown." Sansa's gaze moved to Jon, warming. "Yes, it's good to see you well, Jon." Then, in a quieter tone, she added, "The North was uneasy, but we've managed to keep it stable in your absence." Jon clasped Sansa's hand, smiling faintly. "Thank you for that. You've done the North proud. I know this city isn't your favorite place, but your presence is needed more than ever." Arya swung off her horse with nimble ease, looking around with a faint scowl. "The city still smells like a charnel pit. I suppose some things never change." She offered Jon a brief, tight hug, then bowed slightly to Daenerys, less out of protocol than out of courtesy. "My queen," she said quietly, though her eyes remained sharp. No illusions remained about Arya's lethal skill or her unwavering loyalty to family. Daenerys smiled. "Welcome, Arya. Much has changed, for better or worse. We'll see that you're housed comfortably in the keep, or in the new camp outside, whichever you prefer." Sansa's lips twisted in thought. "The keep would do if you can spare the space. My lords might prefer some distance, but I suspect we'll need to speak often. And the nights are still cold for us to set up tents in the mud." Brienne stepped forward, greeting Daenerys with a respectful nod. "Your Grace, I've come as sworn shield to Lady Sansa, but also in the name of the king in the north who stands beside you." She looked at Jon, sincerity in her gaze. "If you have need of me, you have only to ask." Jon returned the nod. "We have a large watch, but your skill is always welcome, Sir Brienne. We'll meet soon to discuss matters of the council." With pleasantries exchanged, the northern party was led inside. Servants scrambled to show them to newly refurbished chambers. Tyrion arrived soon after, greeting Sansa with polite warmth, though a subtle awkwardness lingered from their shared past. Sansa inquired about the city's condition, the rumored threats, the disappearance of Euron Greyjoy. Tyrion answered as best he could, pushing aside any personal discomfort. Meanwhile, Arya slipped away to wander the corridors, reacquainting herself with the city's nooks and hidden passages. In the following days, other major contingents arrived. The Vale under Lord Royce and a lanky, older Robin Arryn, who tried to project dignity despite his uncertain posture. Lord Edmure Tully representing the Riverlands with a modest escort. Scattered lords from the Reach, including Tarly men who had chosen to remain loyal to the crown after Samwell Tarly's role in the Great War. Gendry Baratheon rode in from Storm's End with knights bearing the crown's stag banner, some of them still uneasy about following a blacksmith's bastard turned lord. But Gendry had proven himself capable enough. The city buzzed with a mixture of tension and curious excitement. Banners fluttered in the breeze, brightening the half-ruined streets. Inns filled to bursting, and merchant stalls choked every corner. The watchers toiled overtime to keep order, while Tormund found the entire spectacle half amusing, half exasperating. He marveled at how kneelers never missed a chance to flaunt their house sigils and fancy clothing. Daenerys and Jon took special care meeting each arrival personally, when possible, reassuring them of safe passage and clarifying the crown's stance. They needed unity, or at least a truce, among old rivals. Factions that once fought one another would have to set aside grudges. But the real test loomed. The actual Great Council, a gathering in the half-repaired Great Hall or possibly a large tent beyond the walls. They had only so much time to arrange seating, protocol, and an agenda. At last, the day arrived when Daenerys declared the Great Council convened. A massive tent, borrowed from the supplies once used by the combined armies in the Great War, had been erected in the outer courtyard near the keep. Banners of all attending houses lined the perimeter, fluttering in the crisp morning wind. Within, a circular arrangement of chairs surrounded a central dais where Daenerys and Jon would preside. Torches burned in braziers to chase away the lingering chill. The sky overhead was overcast, threatening rain but not yet delivering it. Lords, ladies, and their chosen advisors filed in, some wearing armor, others in rich robes. The Vale men stuck close to each other, side-eyeing the Tully knights. The northern lords formed a separate knot, united under Sansa's quiet leadership. Dorne was represented by Lady Nymella, who had returned from Sunspear, and a handful of stern-faced Dornish nobles in brightly patterned silks. The Baratheon men wore stags pinned to their cloaks, forming a circle around Gendry, who looked slightly overwhelmed but determined. The Riverlands contingent greeted each other, old alliances rekindled. A sprinkling of Westerland's lords came, but many seats for that region remained conspicuously empty. House Rosby and a few others near King's Landing tried to hold themselves with dignity. Tyrion hovered near the dais, uneasy at the low Westerlands turnout. As the final stragglers arrived, the hum of conversation subsided, replaced by a watchful hush. Daenerys and Jon entered from behind the dais, accompanied by Grey Worm, Tormund, and a few close guards. Daenerys wore a fitted black and red gown, simpler than her old style, with a small three-headed dragon pin at the shoulder. Jon, clad in dark leathers with a wolf's head belt buckle, stood at her side. The tension was palpable. Daenerys raised a hand for silence, scanning the gathered assembly. She saw so many faces. Some she knew from the Great War, others she recognized only by their house sigils. "Lords and ladies of Westeros," she began, voice carrying in the quiet. "We thank you for heeding our summons. We meet in uncertain times. Our realm has endured the long night, the downfall of House Lannister's tyranny, and a fragile reconstruction. Yet new threats stir. We have called you here to forge a unity that can stand against them." Jon stepped forward, continuing seamlessly. "We have evidence of a dangerous movement known as the Golden Storm. Men wielding sorcery-laced weapons, rumored alliances with pirates and foreign cults. They have struck caravans on our roads, murdered envoys, and threatened to disrupt our fragile peace. Some say Euron Greyjoy leads them or is allied with them. We cannot ignore this." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Some lords looked skeptical, others alarmed. Sansa's composure never wavered, though her eyes flicked to Arya, who stood near the edge of the assembly, scanning for threats. Lady Nymella's expression tightened with recognition, having lost a guard to a runic blade attacker. The Targaryen watchers around the tent kept a close watch on everyone's reactions. Daenerys let the whispers die down. "We ask for your cooperation in fortifying the roads, patrolling the seas, and sharing intelligence. We also call upon you to set aside old grudges. We cannot allow a new horror to tear Westeros apart. That is why we gather in this council, so that each region can voice its concerns, commit to mutual defense, and discuss how to confront a threat that may strike any corner of the realm." Silence settled. Then, predictably, a voice rose from the Westerlands group, a Lord Brax, mustached and wearing a lion-embroidered surcoat. "Your Grace," he said stiffly, "forgive my bluntness, but how do we know these runic blades are not exaggerated stories? The Crown has a history of claiming dire threats. We do not deny the realm faced the White Walkers, but this Golden Storm, can you show us proof?" Tormund let out a bark of laughter. "Proof? We fought them, lost men to their cursed steel. That enough for you, Fancy Lion? We got piles of bodies outside the city for you to sniff if you want." Lord Brax bristled, turning red, but Daenerys interceded. "We have recovered runic weapons. We have witnesses to their unnatural properties. Perhaps Tyrion can speak further. He was wounded by such a blade in the Westerlands." At her prompt, Tyrion cleared his throat, stepping into the circle. He leaned on his cane, lifting a calm gaze. "Yes, I traveled to Casterly Rock weeks ago to search for hidden gold. We were ambushed by men brandishing weapons etched with strange symbols. The wound on my thigh still heals slowly, as if tainted by heat, and I have personal knowledge that these men invoked Euron Greyjoy's name, or a figure styling himself the Golden Storm. They boasted of forging alliances across the sea, presumably with black sorcerers. If we ignore it, we risk letting them fester until they strike in force." An unsettled muttering spread. Lord Brax looked chastened but not convinced. Another voice rose, this time from a matronly lady representing House Hightower. "If pirates or cultists are threatening the coasts, Old Town stands in direct danger. Will the Crown commit naval forces to protect our harbor? Or must we rely on the Iron Bank's mercenaries, as some rumor?" Daenerys answered firmly, "We have watchers along the coast, but we lack a large navy. We rely partly on alliances with House Redwine's ships, Gendry Baratheon's Stormlander fleet, and Yara Greyjoy in the Iron Islands. However, Yara's ravens have gone silent, which may confirm Euron's involvement. We propose each coastal region bolster its own defenses, coordinate with each other, and share costs. If needed, the Crown will provide additional support from the Iron Bank loan. Gendry grimaced slightly at the mention of the Iron Bank, but raised his chin. Storm's End can dispatch a dozen ships to aid Oldtown if trouble arises, though that leaves my own coasts vulnerable. We'll need broader cooperation, perhaps a Westerosi naval league, something that's never truly existed. Nods and whispers. Some lords seemed open to the idea. Others looked wary, suspecting it might be a step toward Targaryen control. Jon cut in. We do not seek to rule your ships or your armies. We ask for unity in the face of a genuine threat. The White Walkers taught us that no single region can stand alone when faced with the unnatural. Sansa spoke up, her voice carrying a measured grace. The North knows better than most how real such threats can be. If we had not united, we'd have perished. I urge you all to heed the Crown's warning. For the cost of ignoring it is far higher than any cost of alliances. A wave of agreement or at least reluctant acceptance coursed through many faces. Lord Royce, arms folded, nodded gruffly. Edmure Tully rubbed his temple but seemed inclined to trust the Starks. Lady Nymella of Dorne, however, lifted her voice. We in Dorne understand the need for unity, but we also recall how so-called alliances have sometimes turned into subjugation. If we commit troops and coin, will you, Queen Daenerys and King Aegon, guarantee that Dornish autonomy is respected once the threat is dealt with? Daenerys met Nymella's eyes across the circle. I've said it before and I say it again. Dorne's customs and internal governance will remain your own. The Crown only asks that you stand with us to protect Westeros from an external menace. Once it is ended, no one will march armies into Dorne uninvited. We do not intend to break that vow. Lady Nymella inclined her head, somewhat mollified. Very well, I will hold you to that promise. To ease tensions further, Daenerys signaled to a small group of attendants to bring in the runic blades, safely wrapped, carried by watchers wearing thick gloves. The watchers stepped forward, placing the cloth-wrapped items on a wooden table in the center. Then, carefully, they peeled back the fabric to display the swirling marks on steel. An uneasy hush seized the tent. The runes seemed to flicker with unnatural shadows under the torchlight, as if mocking the onlookers. A faint hush of fear or awe spread among those who had doubted. That is unnatural, murmured a lesser lord from the Crownlands, stepping back. It's real, Tormund grunted, eyeing the blades with distaste. Seen them burn through a shield or sear a man's flesh. We lost good fighters to those damned runes. Grey Worm, standing near, nodded. They are no idle rumor. Lord Brax swallowed hard, his earlier skepticism melting. I see. If these things are out there in any number, we face black sorcery indeed. Tyrion gestured for the watchers to rewrap the blades. We keep them locked away. No maester in the city can decipher the script. We suspect it's linked to old Essosi bloodforging or relics from Valyria. This is why we must unite, to ensure no large force of these sorcerers or runic-armed soldiers gains a foothold. A tension-filled silence blanketed the gathering. At length, Gendry Baratheon let out a breath. Well, I'm convinced. Storm's End will stand ready to coordinate. We'll push for a combined approach to patrolling the seas. If the rest of you lords do the same in your domains, we stand a chance. Gradually, heads nodded around the circle. The threat felt tangible. The lords murmured about what forces they could spare, how quickly new watchers might be trained. The discussion turned technical, dividing responsibilities, forming lines of communication. Some proposed coin from the crown to offset the cost. Others demanded the monarchy send an official representative to each region to oversee the fight. Tormund growled that they didn't need more southern oversight, but Jon calmed him, explaining that each region must be trusted to manage itself, with watchers or ambassadors acting as liaisons. The day wore on, the Great Council proceeding with occasional breaks for refreshments. Arguments flared. Some lords wanted to focus all resources on the Rose Road region, while others demanded equal attention to the Vale or the Riverlands. Lady Nymella insisted Dorne needed watchers along the Sea of Dorne, in case pirates raided from the Stepstones. A few suspicious Westerlands lords balked, uncertain if they truly wanted to place trust in Daenerys and Jon's monarchy. But the runic blades had left an impression. The memory of the undead invasion still lingered. With measured persuasion, often with Sansa or Tyrion's help, Daenerys and Jon coaxed them toward a consensus. By late afternoon, an agreement emerged. Each region would raise a partial levy of troops dedicated to patrolling major roads and protecting caravans. The monarchy's watchers would help coordinate, while the lords would maintain autonomy in their lands. A new Westerosi naval accord was proposed, still vague, but Gendry and House Redwyne pledged to cooperate with Oldtown and the Stormlands in forming a small defensive fleet. Dorne hinted at possible involvement if their southern coast was threatened. Yara Greyjoy's absence remained troubling. They hoped she would reestablish contact soon. As the council wound down for the day, Daenerys and Jon breathed a cautious sigh of relief. While they had not solved every problem, the realm had at least taken a collective step to face the Golden Storm. Word would spread that the monarchy was forging alliances rather than imposing them. That might weaken Euron's hold, if he was indeed behind the runic cult. Or so they hoped. That evening, a reception was held in the keep's largest intact hall, a portion of the great hall that still had a stable roof. Braziers and torches illuminated a long space, with a few scattered tables for wine and bread. Musicians played soft tunes to lighten the mood. Lords, ladies, knights, and advisors mingled, exchanging cautious pleasantries. Tormund wandered about with a horn of ale, occasionally startling a nervous lord with his boisterous laugh. Arya lurked near the edges, disinterested in formal chatter, but listening. Daenerys and Jon stood near the center, receiving small groups of lords who approached to pledge further support or air personal concerns. One by one they came. Edmure Tully politely offered Riverland's wheat if the city needed more supplies. Lord Royce muttered about ensuring the mountain passes of the Vale were secure. Gendry asked Jon for advice on forging alliances with some Stormland neighbors who doubted a Baratheon bastard. Jon, half smiling, told him that earning trust took time and deeds, not just titles. Amid the swirl, Sansa arrived, accompanied by Brienne. She studied Daenerys quietly for a moment, then offered a small smile. "This arrangement of watchers and shared patrols is a good start," she said, voice subdued. "We'll see if lords actually follow through once they return to their lands." Daenerys nodded. "It's the best we can do for now. Thank you for lending your voice. The North carries weight. The memory of the Great War sways men who might otherwise scoff." Sansa's gaze flicked around. Indeed, people remember Hardhome, the Battle of Winterfell. They also remember King's Landing's fires. Too many scars to let us rest easily. If you need anything else from me, say so. I want to see the realm stable. Though I must admit, I long for the North's quiet sometimes. A soft laugh escaped Daenerys. I, too, sometimes wish for a simpler life, but this is what fate dealt us. She paused. When this is over, you and I should speak about the North's autonomy more thoroughly. You've governed them well in Jon's absence. Sansa's face remained unreadable. We'll see. For now, the realm's unity matters. She glanced at Jon, who was engaged with a cluster of lords discussing local skirmishes in the Crownlands. He looks older, doesn't he? Weary. Daenerys followed her gaze. He carries a heavy burden, but he's strong. Sansa nodded faintly. Yes, stronger than many realize. She hesitated, then added more softly, "Take care of him. He's not one to speak of his own pain." Daenerys offered a genuine smile. "I know. Thank you, Lady Sansa." A short distance away, Tyrion hobbled about, exchanging pleasantries with old acquaintances. He looked ill at ease, but he forced an affable grin. At one point, he found himself cornered by two Westerlands lords who once served the Lannisters. They began questioning him about whether he would claim the seat of Casterly Rock if the monarchy recognized him as a legitimate heir. Tyrion sighed, explaining that his loyalty was to the crown's stability first, not personal lordship. Some men accepted that. Others scowled, uncertain if they trusted a Lannister who had helped bring down House Lannister's queen. Meanwhile, the Dornish contingent, led by Lady Nemella, formed their own cluster, sipping spiced wine. They seemed watchful, ready to pounce on any sign of disrespect. Tormund ambled over, attempting to strike up a conversation about desert climates, which quickly turned into him describing the far north. The Dornishmen looked bemused, but it eased tension. Even they had to admit Tormund's raw directness was strangely disarming. As the reception wound on, Daenerys slipped out a side door to catch her breath. The clamoring of voices inside grew muffled behind her. She entered a narrow corridor, flickering torches casting long shadows on damp stone. She inhaled, trying to still the swirl of her thoughts. The day had been a step forward, but the path ahead remained treacherous. A sound made her glance up. Standing at the corridor's far end was the Red Priestess Zahara, cloak pulled tight around her slender frame. Her amber eyes caught the torchlight, reflecting an almost feline gleam. She dipped her head in a respectful motion, then approached with measured steps. "My queen," Zahara said softly, her accent carrying musical tones. "I did not wish to intrude on the council. I am no lord of Westeros, but I bring a message you should hear." Daenerys stiffened. "We said we'd permit your presence if you did not meddle. Why are you here?" Zahara's expression remained calm. "My acolytes at the harbor gleaned word from sailors newly arrived from Lys. They claim a dark ship prowls the narrow sea, flying no banner, manned by men with golden swirl tattoos and weapons that glow at night. These sailors nearly collided with it in a storm. They say it moved unnaturally fast, as if guided by dark winds. The significance is clear. The golden storm tests your waters." Daenerys's pulse quickened. "Have you told the Watch?" Zahara shook her head. "I came first to you. The Watch might dismiss it as rumor. But if it's true, Euron or his allies may be creeping closer, possibly searching for weaknesses." Daenerys's mind whirred. If a runic-armed vessel was scouting the narrow sea, that threatened trade routes and possibly gave them a direct path to King's Landing's harbor. "We cannot let them roam unchallenged." Zahara's gaze flicked to the corridor's flickering torch. "Indeed not. My priests can attempt to read the flames, see if we can pinpoint their location. But that alone might not suffice. You must alert your watchers at Dragonstone and the Gullet. The Storm's men might slip past if we rely only on local captains." Daenerys ground her teeth, thinking of how short-staffed their navy was. "We will do so immediately. If you glean anything more from your visions, inform me at once." The priestess nodded. "Of course, my queen. The night is dark, and the shadows do not rest." With that, Zahara turned and glided away, leaving Daenerys alone in the corridor. Her heart thudded. The threat was real and creeping closer. She must not let the lords feasting in the next hall remain ignorant. She needed to speak with Jon Grey Worm, perhaps Gendry, to bolster the naval watch. As she stepped back toward the reception, her mind was already racing with instructions. Send fast ships from Dragonstone to scout. Warn all eastern ports. Remain vigilant. The Golden Storm had made its first maritime move. By morning, King's Landing was abuzz with rumors. Some said a ghost ship haunted the narrow sea. Others that Euron Greyjoy had become a sorcerer himself. The official announcement from the Crown stated only that suspicious vessels might be active, and that the watchers on Dragonstone, Massey's Hook, and the Gullet were on high alert. The lords who had arrived for the council found themselves pulled into a second day of discussions, this time focusing on naval defense. Daenerys, flanked by Jon, Gendry, and Tyrion, addressed the assembly once more in the tent. She disclosed the rumor of a dark ship with runic-armed men, cautioning that it might be the first sign of an incursion by the Golden Storm. Gendry volunteered to send out half his small Stormlander fleet to patrol the waters between Storm's End and Dragonstone. House Redwine's delegates said they would pass the news to the Arbor and Old Town, though they insisted they could not commit their entire fleet on such short notice. Tensions rose again, with some lords complaining that they lacked ships and shouldn't be asked to fund a naval force. Others demanded the monarchy do more. Amid the heated debate, Sansa stepped forward, voice measured. We cannot ignore the sea threat just because some of us have no coastline. A strong navy near King's Landing and Dragonstone defends the trade that feeds all of Westeros. My people in the north may not sail many ships, but we rely on southern grain and goods. We must stand together. We can offer manpower to garrison coastal forts if needed. Her words carried weight. After more argument, the council agreed to form a narrow sea defense pact, under which Gendry Stormlanders, any loyal Westerlands lords with ships, and allied houses from the Crownlands would station a rotating patrol of vessels near Dragonstone. The monarchy promised partial reimbursement. Again, the Iron Bank's loan would help, though it pained Daenerys to rely on it. Meanwhile, watchers on land would keep an eye on any suspicious harbor activity, cooperating with Redwyne ships further south. It was a patchwork plan, but it was something. Tyrion noted privately to Jon that this might buy them time to build a more permanent navy, if and when the realm stabilized. At least, Tyrion said wryly, we have some unity in fear. Perhaps that's the best impetus. By the council's third and final day, a sense of weary camaraderie had formed among many delegates. Though there were plenty of undercurrents, rivalries, quiet vendettas, muttered complaints, publicly they presented a semblance of cooperation. Daenerys and Jon oversaw the signing of a formal statement, proclaiming the realm's unity against the Golden Storm threat. Each signatory region pledged to commit troops to road patrols, share intelligence, and support the new naval pact. Dorne received assurances of respect for its autonomy. The North was recognized as having partial self-governance, and the Vale, the Riverlands, and the Reach hammered out details for provisioning watchers. No single piece of parchment could quell all disputes, but it was a foundation. After the signing, they held a brief ceremony in the courtyard, with a symbolic oath sworn before the monarchy and the attending lords. Rain threatened, but only a light drizzle fell, as if the sky were content to watch. Torches sputtered in the damp air, reflected on the wet cobblestones. Daenerys stood, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had accomplished something unprecedented in the short history of her reign, an actual meeting of nearly all regions, forging alliances that might endure. Now they had to see if the lords would keep their word when they scattered back to their homes. Once the ceremony concluded, many of the lords prepared to depart over the next few days, returning to their lands with new tasks. Sansa and Arya intended to remain for a short while longer, consulting with Jon about northern issues and visiting the city's reconstruction. Lady Nymella made plans to ride for Dorne soon, but not before conferring privately with Daenerys about trade. Gendry lingered to finalize arrangements for the new naval patrols. Edmure Tully set out almost immediately, anxious to quell unrest in the Riverlands. The Vale contingent followed suit, relieved to exit the city before any new crisis arose. Through it all, Daenerys Nodi said a subtle sense of watchfulness from the Red Priests at the harbor. Zahara seldom appeared in public, but rumors said she had grown fervent in her nightly fires, seeing shapes in the flames. No fresh brawls erupted, in part due to the Watchers' vigilance and the slight easing of tensions from the Great Council. Yet Daenerys could not shake the feeling that some next blow was coming, whether from Euron's rumored ship or the deeper conspiracies weaving through Essos. One dusky evening, she stood at the keep's highest intact balcony, gazing over the city rooftops. Torchlight flickered in winding alleyways, and the faint hum of distant voices rose in the warm twilight. The day had been quiet, with many lords departing. Drogon perched on the rubble of a half-collapsed tower nearby, watchful. Umbrax soared overhead, a dark silhouette cutting across the sky. In that moment, the realm felt strangely peaceful, too peaceful, perhaps. Jon approached from behind, footsteps soft on the worn stone. He slipped an arm around her waist, a casual familiarity they seldom indulged in public. She leaned into him, letting out a small sigh. "Are you satisfied with how the council ended?" he asked gently, mouth near her ear. She gave a slow nod. "As much as one can be. We gained alliances, established the Watchers' network. If we get a few months of calm, maybe we can further strengthen the realm. But I fear the Golden Storm might not give us that time." Jon's gaze followed Umbrax, who wheeled away, heading out toward open fields for a night hunt. We've done all we can for now. If Euron's truly out there, he'll face a more united Westeros than he expects. And if he tries to capture Umbrax or harness runic forging, we'll meet him with dragonfire and steel." Daenerys turned to face him, searching his eyes. "And if the rumored sorcerers from Essos bring even darker powers?" Bran's visions hinted at forces beyond our comprehension. "We might be battling more than just men with twisted swords." Jon exhaled, lifting his free hand to brush a loose strand of her silver hair behind her ear. "I've seen ancient evils defeated before. We must not lose hope. We have a realm that still believes in living, in forging a better future. That's how we fight the darkest powers." She offered a small, grateful smile. "You speak as though you never tire of these burdens. But I see the strain. I wish there was a simpler life for us both." He gently cupped her cheek. "Me too. But fate placed us here. We'll see it through." They stood in the hush of twilight, feeling each other's warmth. The city below them breathed with 100,000 souls, uncertain of tomorrow but pressing on. In the distance, a single horn note echoed from the outer wall, likely a routine watch signal, not an alarm. Daenerys and Jon held each other's gaze. They had fought the long night, toppled tyrants, and now braced for a hidden war. Even so, they found a fragile solace in the bond they shared. Morning brought a final swirl of farewells. Sansa prepared to depart for Winterfell, with Arya at her side. They stood in the keep's courtyard, saddling their horses under a damp sky. Jon, Daenerys, and Tyrion gathered to see them off. Brienne and a group of northern guards would accompany them on the journey. Sansa clasped Jon's forearm. "Take care, brother. Let me know the moment you need the North's help. We'll keep watchers on our roads, per the new arrangement. If these runic swords show up near our borders, we'll crush them." Arya, standing beside a white mare, flicked her eyes to Jon and Daenerys. "I'll keep an ear out for rumors. If you need someone quiet to handle an infiltration, you know where to find me." A hint of that old lethal cunning glimmered in her stare. Daenerys had grown to respect Arya's remarkable skill, though she still found the girl's aura slightly unnerving. Daenerys stepped forward. "Safe travels. Thank you for your help in the council." The North's voice helped sway many. "I trust you'll continue championing unity from your seat." Sansa dipped her head. "We will. Farewell, your grace." She cast a last look at Tyrion, offering him a polite nod. "Lord Tyrion, I appreciate your efforts here. You've changed much since we last saw each other in these walls." Tyrion gave a faint smile. "Change can be for the better, Lady Sansa. I wish you a good journey." With that, the Stark party set out through the city gates. A small crowd watched them pass, some calling out thanks or respectful greetings. Tormund, who had grown oddly fond of Sansa's stoicism, waved them off, then turned away to examine a new arrivals list for watchers. Days slipped into a pattern of heightened vigilance. Scouts patrolled the roads. Gendry's fledgling naval pact launched a handful of ships from Dragonstone and Storm's End to patrol the narrow sea. The city itself saw a partial exodus of the council delegates. But new concerns bubbled up. Stories of runic sightings near Lannisport trickled in, though incomplete. Euron's rumored ghost ship was not confirmed, but suspicious glimpses made nerves taut. Meanwhile, a handful of lesser lords from the Westerlands lingered in King's Landing, complaining about the monarchy's taxes or the memory of lost Lannister power. The Red Priestess, Zahara, requested a private audience once more. This time, Daenerys and Jon granted it in the keep's library corridor, flanked by watchers. Zahara reported that her flames showed a black silhouette stirring in the waters to the west, near Fair Isle. She warned that more men might be forging runes there, hidden from the monarchy's watchers. Without a navy in that region, they had no eyes on the coastline. Daenerys felt her frustration mounting. They could not be everywhere at once. In a tense exchange, Tyrion advocated dispatching a small force to Fair Isle or Case, but the monarchy simply did not have enough men to hold so many points. The watchers were stretched along the Crownlands roads, the Rose Road, the coastal approach near Storm's End, plus city defenses. Repeatedly, They found themselves balancing immediate threats against the realm's scarce resources. Yet life persisted. Some sections of King's Landing began to look more hopeful. An open-air market blossomed in the central square, peddling produce from the Reach, crafts from the Vale, even furs from the north. Freedmen from Essos who had followed Daenerys settled into trades, and city dwellers found modest but stable work in reconstruction. A cautious optimism spread among the small folk that maybe the realm was finally healing. However, Daenerys and Jon remained too conscious of the shadows lurking beyond the horizon. One quiet afternoon, Daenerys found herself on the keep's southwestern parapet, listening to the gentle flap of freshly hung banners. She spotted Jon below, crossing the courtyard to speak with Grey Worm about routine watchers. Warm sunlight bathed the stone, though a mild breeze carried the scent of the sea. She let her thoughts drift, recalling the cycle of war and adversity they had endured. Despite it all, they had achieved small victories. The Great Council's alliances, though fragile, were real. The roads were somewhat safer. The city had not collapsed. A distant roar made her turn. Umbrax circled high overhead, a living testament to the Targaryens' ancient power. Drogon was visible in the far distance, perched near the half-ruined tower. She never fully relaxed unless she sensed her dragons near. If the Golden Storm threatened them, they would soon learn that even runic weapons might falter against the raw might of Targaryen fire, assuming those runes didn't harbor a deeper trick. That question gnawed at her. Could runic forging harm her dragons beyond minor scratches? She prayed not. But if the cult truly sought the Black Dragon's blood for some twisted ritual, they might have designs more dreadful than a mere fight. Rousing herself from these dark thoughts, she decided to rejoin Jon and Grey Worm below. There was always more to plan, more to do, especially if Zahara's warnings about the western coasts proved accurate. She walked down the winding stairs, passing corridors where new tapestries hung, gifts from southern lords aiming to curry favor. She found Tyrion in a side hall, bent over a stack of ledgers, complaining about the Iron Bank's interest rates. She paused, gave him a brief update, then moved on. In the courtyard, she noticed Tormund teaching a handful of Watchers' archery drills. The big wildling beamed as he corrected their stances, boasting he'd once shot an arrow through a giant's eye at 200 paces. The Watchers looked half amused, half wary. Yet he was effective in drilling them. Daenerys allowed a small smile. Tormund's presence reminded everyone that they had once been forced to unify beyond the wall. The realm needed that spirit now. Spotting Grey Worm at the far gate, she approached. Jon was there too, arms folded. They spoke in low tones about the schedule of patrols. Grey Worm saluted as Daenerys arrived. "How goes it?" she asked. Jon gave a wry tilt of the head. "We're shifting watchers to the Rose Road and the coastal routes near Rosby. We're short-handed, but hopefully we'll deter further ambushes." Grey Worm's men remain vigilant. "We just heard from a scout who rode the Stormlands coast. No sign of suspicious ships, which might be good news or might mean they sail elsewhere." She nodded, exhaling. "We must remain on guard. Zahara claims trouble stirs near the Westerlands coasts, but we have limited presence there." Tyrion suggested sending an envoy to gather local support. "Perhaps we might dispatch a small detachment led by someone with ties to that region." "But not him, he's still wounded." Grey Worm considered. "I can spare a few unsullied, but not many. If we do, we must trust the local houses to provide the bulk of manpower. If they remain loyal to the crown, they should comply." Daenerys pursed her lips. "We could send Lord Brax or one of his peers back with official instructions, but I'm not sure I trust them fully. They might do nothing or worse." Jon's expression hardened. "We'll think on it. For now, at least the city stands. The Great Council ended without bloodshed. That's a victory." Grey Worm saluted and left to oversee guard rotations, leaving Daenerys and Jon alone. They strolled toward a small orchard that had somehow survived the city's turmoil. A handful of peach trees grew among the rubble. The air smelled faintly of blossoms and stone dust. Daenerys paused beneath one of the trees, turning to Jon. "Sometimes I wonder if we can truly break this wheel. We patch one crisis, another emerges. This realm, so battered by old hatreds and new terrors, will it ever find lasting peace? Jon reached for her hand gently, lacing his fingers with hers. We can't ensure peace forever, but we can lay a foundation so that the next generation doesn't inherit endless war. We've come a long way from the days of Daenerys alone in Essos or me alone on the wall. We have an alliance across nearly every region, shaky though it is. That's progress. She gave a soft smile. Progress indeed. Her gaze flicked to the sky, recalling Umbrax's silhouette. Still, I'll remain uneasy until we confront the heart of this golden storm. But for now, we hold. We endure. Jon squeezed her hand. A mild breeze stirred the orchard leaves. For a moment, they shared the hush of that place, enveloped by the hum of distant construction, the swirl of dusty air, and the faint calls of watchers training in the yard. In that sliver of calm, they found hope that a future could be built from the ashes. A future where illusions of conquest gave way to genuine unity, and where the old magics no longer enslaved men's souls. That night, after a final walk along the keep's ramparts, Daenerys returned to her modest royal chambers, weary beyond measure. Her mind buzzed with everything. The alliances, the continuing search for Euron, the Red Priests, the Westerlands' infiltration, the naval patrols. She shed her cloak, let her hair down, and tried to ease tense muscles. The flicker of candlelight cast dancing shadows on the stone walls. Outside, the city grew quiet, the day's bustle fading. The faint roar of a distant dragon assured her that Drogon and Umbrax still kept vigil in the skies. A knock at the door. She turned to see Jon stepping inside quietly, shutting it behind him. He wore a simple tunic and breeches, face lined with exhaustion. Without words, he crossed the room and drew her into his arms, resting his forehead against hers. She leaned into him, feeling the tension of the day melt into the warmth of his presence. No grand speeches were needed. They had spoken all day, forging the realm's tenuous new shape. Here, in private, was the only place they could set aside the burdens of rule for a moment. Jon's hand stroked her hair. She inhaled the familiar scent of leather and faint sweat, the tangible sign that they were not just rulers but living, breathing people. They stood that way for a while, hearts beating in quiet unison, until exhaustion fully claimed them. Daenerys let him guide her toward the bed, where they collapsed together, layered in the day's fatigue and the comfort of shared affection. In the dim, candlelit hush, she felt that perhaps, for all the shadows looming, they had forged something better than the realm once knew. They had united rivals, ended tyrants, defied prophecy. They had each other. It would have to be enough, at least for this night. Dawn brought a new swirl of tasks. Word spread that a small group of Westermen, led by a minor Lannister cousin, wanted an audience with the crown about farmland disputes. Gendry's captains arrived from Dragonstone, reporting they had sighted no suspicious vessels in the gullet, but needed more supplies for extended patrol. Grey Worm was finalizing a roster of watchers to escort Lady Nymella home, ensuring no runic ambush on the Rose Road. Tyrion groaned over more demands from the Iron Bank, lamenting that while the realm had made strides politically, the finances remained precarious. Daenerys and Jon faced each challenge with the same grim determination. The people of Westeros saw a monarchy trying to unify rather than dominate. Some disliked it, longing for the old days of absolute kings or powerful feudal lords. Others admired it, feeling that the monarchy's humility gave them a voice. In every corner, rumors of the Golden Storm blended with rumors of new trade, red priests, and dragons. The realm felt poised on the edge of transformation, uncertain which way it would tilt. Days turned into weeks. Lords filtered out of the city, returning to their lands, armed with alliances or mutual defense pacts. The Watchers spread across major roads. Occasional sightings of suspicious travelers circulated, but no major runic attacks occurred. Perhaps the Golden Storm had withdrawn for the moment, or perhaps they bided their time. Daenerys remained vigilant, sending scouts to the Westerlands, the Crownlands, even discreetly contacting some ex-Lannister bannermen for intelligence. She arranged with Tyrion to plan a possible mission west if needed. Meanwhile, Yara Greyjoy remained silent. Not a single raven from Pike. That weighed heavily on Daenerys's mind, as Yara had pledged to guard the seas. She worried that Euron might have struck Pike, or Yara might be too embattled to send word. Gendry's new navy was too small to sail that far uninvited. Tormund grumbled that they should mount a rescue, but resources were thin. Daenerys made a mental note to address that once the roads were fully secured, if they delayed too long, the Iron Islands might become another front for the runic threat. Or worse, Euron might use them as a base. One evening, after a modest meal in the keep's hall, Daenerys and Jon decided to walk outside the city walls, craving open air. They passed through the northern gate, watchers saluting. Tormund tagged along initially, but Daenerys gently suggested he remain behind to help Grey Worm with the night patrol briefing. Tormund shrugged, allowed them their privacy. They wandered along a rolling field, where the encampment from the Great Council had partly disbanded. Only a few leftover tents and wagons remained. The sky was streaked pink and gold from the setting sun. A mild breeze rustled the tall grass. A pair of watchers trailed at a distance for security, but Daenerys and Jon paid them little mind. Eventually they reached a gentle slope that overlooked the meandering Rose Road. Far off, they could see travelers with pack animals watch patrols a distant orchard. The city's silhouette rose behind them, half lit by the dying sun. Drogon circled overhead, a black shape against the fiery sky, while Umbrax soared further away, patrolling the farmland. Daenerys let out a slow breath, enjoying the quiet. Jon, at her side, spoke softly. Moments like this, I remember that there's more to life than war. If only the realm could see it. She slipped her arm through his. One day, perhaps, if we can quell these last threats. We have a fragile peace now, made of alliances. Next, we must give it time to grow stronger. They stood there, the grass swaying around their boots. Jon glanced at her. You once asked if the realm could ever break the wheel. I think we have begun. House Targaryen isn't alone. House Stark stands with it, the Free Folk, Dorne, the Vale, the Stormlands. Even the Riverlands. The old order is changing. She gave a slight nod. Yes, though the future remains uncertain. Magic seeps into corners of the world, but we stand ready. The memories of the White Walkers, the downfall of Cersei, it all taught us to unite or perish. Jon squeezed her arm gently. We'll remain vigilant. If Euron or the Golden Storm returns in force, we'll call on these new alliances. They'll answer. We can protect Westeros from another cataclysm. Her heart felt a subtle warmth at his confidence. She turned to him, resting a hand lightly on his chest. We will. Thank you, Jon, for standing beside me through it all, for forging alliances, for calming the lords, for trusting me with your realm. He brushed a thumb over her cheek. It's our realm, Daenerys. Targaryen, Stark, everyone we've brought together. I trust you as you trust me. Silence lingered as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Drogon glided overhead, letting out a low rumble that echoed across the field. Umbrax answered with a distant roar, wings slicing through the air. The watchers stood at a respectful distance. Daenerys and Jon turned to head back before full darkness fell. Their footsteps rustled in the tall grass. Despite the weight of threats, the day ended in calm. If the Golden Storm lurked, it had not struck that night. The realm was not yet saved, but it breathed a rare moment of stillness. Daenerys held Jon's hand, drawing quiet strength from him. She carried 1,000 hopes for Westeros in her heart. Hopes that, with time, might become reality. As they neared the gate, the city lights glimmered like scattered stars on earth. Beyond those walls, the monarchy they had forged waited, shaped by fragile alliances and new bonds. The future beckoned, uncertain and filled with potential dangers, but at least now they faced it together. If war came again, they would answer, dragons at their side, watchers on the roads, hearts unbowed. For the first time in generations, Westeros had a chance at unity strong enough to outlast any tempest, mortal or magical. And in that possibility lay their greatest triumph so far.